Hey everyone, this is Andrew from Private Investigator Advice, and this is the Private Investigator Advice podcast. This is going to be episode 86, with the podcast title basically being Private Investigator Resume Example and Tips. Now, of course, it's going to be very difficult for me to articulate what my resume looks like in a podcast, so you will have to take a look at the article, which I will have posted on piadvice.net. I'll have a link to the article in the video that I'm shooting right now for this podcast. And that'll be in the bottom section. Also, if you're looking at this or listening to this through your podcast app, I'll link to it in there as well. The main reason I wanted to do this, now I'm kind of putting myself out there a little bit for you guys, is I just want to get you guys, no matter where you are in your career, the best opportunity to succeed. And, I felt that sharing my resume, would help you maybe articulate some of the things you want to put in there or format it. And there's a ton of stuff online for stuff like this. But, this is basically my resume. It hasn't been updated in a while. I haven't applied anywhere in a very long time. It's been a few years. I think the last time I applied somewhere. I think I blogged about it. I actually turned down the opportunity, I agreed with the owner that it wasn't a good fit for my situation. I'll try to find that article and share that somewhere, maybe in the notes for the podcast, or in the article that I'll be posting along with this podcast. But anyways, I don't claim to be some kind of resume master, but I have seen a lot of resumes in my time, and and with that being said, like the resume that I'll be sharing is really focused on just getting hired with an investigation company. So I think that's right up your guys' alley. And that's all I've really ever sent my resume to, is to other investigation companies. I haven't really sent it outside of that. So it's really kind of just tailored for that. Anyways, you'll get to see a lot of my experience that's on there, and how I present that. And, if you've been in this industry a while, you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, that's a typical resume. But if you haven't, you kind of see how my experience evolved. And I've talked about it before, but you can kind of see it on paper. But anyways, aside from that, of course, you're going to have to go look at that yourself. I'm going to provide some resume tips for you that I've seen some resume fails, and I just want to share some tips on that so you don't make some of the same mistakes that some of these other existing investigators make, or potential future investigators make. But before we get into that, I have to tell you that this episode is brought to you by PI Advice. That's right, me. I've got several templates and forms for you to check out. I've got the intake form, which basically collects information from your client, not only about your client, but about, of course, the assignment that you plan on working for them. So it just really makes sure that you get the important information. I think a lot of people kind of skim over the actual client part. That's actually very important to know as much about your client as possible, within reason, in regards, because that's your client and that's who you're going to have to be working for, but you also want to make sure you know who they are. We have the retainer agreement. The retainer agreement makes sure that everybody understands what's happening, how much the investigator is going to get paid, and the client's very aware what they're paying for, how they're paying. A lot of different expectations will all be understood in the retainer agreement. So there's that. And my favorite one, the surveillance template. This is good for anybody, not just business owners or anything like that. Even people that want to get into the industry should actually take a look at this, because if you work for an investigation company doing surveillance, they're going to have some sort of template to work on. But that's not even the best part. I give an example report so you can kind of see the verbiage and how things are formatted, and kind of get an idea of what a surveillance report will look like. And of course, I do a little video walkthrough as well. You're going to have that, and it's going to go by each section and say, okay, this is this, and here's how you put pictures in the Word document, how you kind of make it look pretty. So there's that. So again, thank you for listening to that plug. I'll have links to all that in the video notes if you're watching this on YouTube, and also the podcast notes and the website. You can always go to piadvice.net, and on the sidebar, you'll see all the links to that. Okay, guys. So one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like drives me up the wall, and this happens all the time in resumes. And it's like crazy. It's like this is like the one thing you don't want to do. Like, you know, when you're when you're applying for an investigation company, people might try to get away with it in other companies, and that's fine. I think this is like it's crazy to try to do it in an investigation company, and that's lie or embellish on your resume. And I listen, I've hinted to this before, like just generally speaking, and these podcasts and things like that. Like, it's like, don't do it because we're going to figure you out, and then it's going to ruin your credibility, right? So don't lie. Don't lie about your previous employers, or your experience, or don't embellish on it. Don't say you've done more than you really have. Don't say, you know, I've done this so many times, but really maybe you only did it once, whatever that thing is, you know. Eventually, even if you get into the company, even if you get hired under these lies, the people you talk to, they're going to sniff it out, because eventually your lack of experience or the embellishing that you did about how much you did something will shine through in a conversation, or in your results, and your credibility will be lost. And I've seen many companies just kind of like, okay, just stop assigning at work to somebody because they just can't trust the person that they've hired. And the people that you work with, like if you happen to work, you know, 2-man surveillances and things like that, or 2-man investigations, or with just any kind of investigation with anybody else, if they can't trust you with your credibility, then the work environment will be completely horrible for you. So anyways, just keep it straight with them, and you'll always have a clean conscience coming in if you win, and if you do get hired with the company. So that would be my first tip for you. Okay, so my second tip would be tailor your resume for the job. Okay, but we don't want to lie. We're not doing that. But like I told you in the resume that you've been taking a look at on the article that it's associated to this podcast, is my resume is tailored towards other investigation companies. So I'm not as detailed in some areas because they are going to know what certain terms mean because they're in the same industry. So what you want to do for you is make sure you look at the requirements, look what's being requested from whatever company you're trying to get a job from, and you want to tailor your experience that you've done to the job itself. And you're going to want to take keywords out. Now, again, we're not lying here. We just want to find out what connects the dots as much as you can from your experience from working wherever you were at, to or any training you had to the job itself. So that's where I kind of get into the word tailoring. So here's an example. If a lot of people come from the security guard industry. If you wrote reports as a security officer, you want to make sure that you mention that, because report writing is a huge thing in the investigation industry. You might even want to say, hey, I type 50 words a minute. You might even add that somewhere in the resume, just to kind of show like, hey, this is not going to take me 5 hours to write a report. I can get these things done quickly. Maybe even, it might show that like the verbiage a little bit in regards, because maybe you picked up the surveillance template that we talked about earlier and you got that example report. So anyways, any little small little things that you can associate that might relate from what you've done in the past in the resume to what you're applying for is going to help you. Okay, so sometimes, this is going to be number 3, sometimes they don't need your entire employment history. Every company is different in regards to what they're looking for, right? Some people put more emphasis on other things than some things other than other things, and vice versa for other companies. So, some companies are like, tell me every single job you've had in the past 10 years. And that's going to be important to them. They're going to know your job history. But every applicant is different also. Some people will only have one job like for the past 30 years, and that's their experience. And that's fine. And maybe that 30 years was totally unrelated to investigations, while some other people will have, maybe 10 jobs in 10 years. But what I would say is like, nobody wants to see that you delivered, maybe you've been in the workforce for 30 years. Nobody wants to see that you delivered pizzas when you're, back in 1976 or whatever. Like they don't, it's not going to be applicable to the job, the investigation job you're applying for. But you really want to like just, you're not lying about anything. But, if let's say you worked for Costco, and maybe you had a part-time job as a pizza driver or something like that, in the past 10 years, you don't need to mention that you did pizza delivery. You don't need to do that. It's not necessary. But I would say, with that being said, a lot of resumes will put something to the effect of more employment history upon request. So if they want to know that you delivered pizzas, in the last 10 years as you were doing another job or something to that effect, then of course give it to them. But, just some things aren't going to be necessary. Maybe you had a side job. Maybe you're working a full-time job doing whatever, and you sold Scentsy or something like that on the side. Again, not really necessary to mention that in your resume. Okay, so number what are we on here? I didn't number these in my article here. So 1, 2, 3. We're on 4. So number 4 is, please do not add a picture of yourself. It is completely unnecessary. In fact, a lot of resume sites say, listen, if you're not a supermodel or applying to be a model or an actor or something to that effect, then your face does not reflect on whether you should be getting the job or not. Do you know what I mean? So, let's just keep it out. I don't think I really need to elaborate too much on that. So no photos. You're not an investigator model. You're just applying for an investigator job. Okay. All right. The next one. Format your, and this is, listen, a lot of guys are probably already doing this anyways, but format your resume in chronological order. Don't, you want to, your job history or whatever. That's how mine looks, starting from like whatever. I think my first job listed on there is the military. And then so that was, gosh, it wasn't that long ago, a long time ago, but now what is that? That's almost 20 years ago. 20 years ago today, I started the military. Or not today, but this year. So 1998, I joined the military. And so anyway, so that would be my first job on there. And then from there on, it's like, okay, after the Army, I had this, and then after that, and I had this, after that, and so on. So, make it chronological order. And so a couple things will happen. It kind of shows them, your job history, how long you stayed at each place. But also kind of shows how you've built on your experience. And that it might reflect like, well, maybe you started, at the bottom of this company. And then maybe then it shows like, you worked your way up to manager. And then maybe the next job that you took was a director. So you're building upon you're trying to grow in your job. It also kind of show how long you stay with each company. All that kind of stuff is taken in consideration with employers. One of the ones that I didn't realize wasn't a thing because I just, I told you early on that I haven't applied for a job in a long time. Like I just haven't had to do that. So, one of the things is don't add an objective. Apparently it could do just as much damage as it can, be helpful, I guess, adding an objective. And that was a pretty standard thing. Maybe 15 years ago, adding an objective, but, apparently, this kind of insinuates, what you want, what you need from a company rather than what you can offer a company. So apparently an objective is not needed. Now, I would say that if there's some reason where you need to specifically say, I'm applying for this investigator position in Washington State or something like that, it needs to be detailed so they go, oh, okay, like, because some are nationwide companies and they're like, oh, well, okay, that's great. He's applying for a company. Where is he located? Like what state is he applying for? Like, we don't know. You might need to add it for something like that. The employer might even ask you to do that. But other than that, it's probably not necessary. The next one is don't mention what high school you attended. So unless you're really early in your kind of like employment history, so maybe graduating high school was only 5 years ago or a few years ago for you. There's no reason to even mention it. what school you went to, because it just doesn't add any value. And with that being said, you don't want to add a graduation date, because that will date you. And so if somebody, for some reason, is looking at age, which I've talked about this before about age discrimination, that is a thing. They can't do it, but you don't even want any bias or anything like that underlying you getting hired with a company for some reason. Now, listen, I don't think that'll happen, but you just don't want to provide that opportunity. So, you graduated high school, that's fine, or you got your GED, whatever the case may be. Anyway, so, and I've also heard that, before I go to the next one, some people say don't even add that you've graduated. And that might be in your employment application. They might ask you that, or it might be a requirement to getting on with the company, or even getting your PI license or something like that. But, I've heard other people say, don't even add it, at all, because it's kind of like a given that most people have graduated or got their GED. I don't agree with that necessarily, but anyways. Okay. So the next one is, do not provide previous salaries on your resume. Now, I don't know a lot of people that do that. I haven't come across a whole lot, but if you've thought about doing that, or you do have that on your resume, go ahead and take that off, because what that'll do is kind of give them a base of what they can work with. And it might ruin your, negotiating power if you've, said, well, I came from this last company, or I'm with this company right now, and I'm making $20 an hour. And then their minds are going, okay, well, so I only have to maybe give this guy 21. When really you probably could have got 25 or more, so you don't need to give them any more ammunition regarding salary negotiation than you have to. Okay, guys, the next one is the length of your resume. And this is going to be a tough one for some people. For some people, you're like, I worked for a company for 30 years, so no problem. That's going to pretty much make up my resume. But for some of you, you may, it may be hard to get everything in there that you feel is relevant to the job, when you're kind of tailoring your resume. So, I've always, and this has kind of been the standard for, at least 20 years when I got out of the Army, like everybody's always like a one-page resume, just a one-page resume. And that's still to this day, people are pretty much only looking for that. Maybe two, like depending on how much work history you have, it shouldn't be more than two. And I think a lot of resume writing companies or recommenders say, you're pushing it with two, but sometimes it just depending on what you're applying for, it just totally needs to be done. So, anyways, if you're in your 20s and you haven't had a great deal of experience, your resume shouldn't be more than 2 pages. Like, it'd be hard to argue that it would need to be that long. Okay, and also remember, and we're going to get into this. Well, actually, we're going to get into this next. You always can have a cover letter, which is totally normal in resumes and expected sometimes, especially. Well, let's get into it. So. Cover letters is the next one. You should, if you feel it necessary, I never really, I can only think of maybe a handful of times that I had to write a cover letter for the job I had applied for. And that was honestly because it was outside of this mainstream investigation industry. It was, in fact, I'm trying to remember now. And so please bear with me. It might have been for like a loss prevention manager or I don't know, some kind of, it was for like a phone company. Anyways, it would be like, it was based around like Wicklander and it was, long story short, it was loss prevention. So I had to tailor a lot of my investigation experience around, and my previous loss prevention experience around that job. So I made sure I added a cover letter to kind of connect the dots. And that's what I think a cover letter is really about. It's about connecting the dots for, in addition to how you've tailored your resume, connecting the dots to your experience in whatever jobs you've done, and explaining, or even anything that you want to make sure they understand about what you've done in the past. We're gonna, it's gonna help them and their company. or how do I put this? How your experience is applicable to, getting on with them. And so with that being said, so you kind of get the idea of that. With that being said, you don't want to write a 4-page cover letter. Your cover letter is going to be 1 page, and it's going to be 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph is going to be an introduction to who you are, what job you're applying for, and how you learned about the job. It's kind of like an icebreaker. Number 2, the second paragraph is going to be discussing how your skills make you a good fit for their company. And of course, you want to match your skills, like we kind of talked about with tailoring the resume. You're going to match your skills with the job description. And then finally, the last little bit you're going to write on there is the conclusion. You're going to thank them, hey, thank you for, giving me the opportunity, and thank you for the consideration for this job. So anyways, that is the resume tips that I have for you today. So when you guys take a look at the resume on the website, again, I've made some small changes, nothing that changes the actual, I don't know, it's not the actual experience itself, just the names of some companies that I've worked for in the past, because they're a little too new. So I changed some of those names, and my resume is, I think it was when I look back at it before creating this post, it was a little more over than 1 page. I actually shortened it to make it fit 1 page as I was talking or writing this. And with that being said, my resume was, this is over 20 years. So 1 page for 20 years of experience. I was able to fit that in there. So that's going to do it for today, guys. Finally, I'll end with this. This episode is also brought to you by Audible. Audible is giving away a credit for a free book, and all you have to do is sign up for their free 30-day trial to get that. If you've ever, if you drive long distances to, your surveillances or your cases or whatever job you have now, what better way to pass the time than listening to someone read to you. So if you would, check that out. It is, they've got a ton of books, by the way. You can go to audibletrial.com/PIA, and that'll let you know that I sent you, and I am an affiliate for that, and I will receive a small commission should you decide to sign up to that free trial. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I really enjoyed writing this article and actually talking about it with you. And I hope this has some kind of impact, whether you're an investigator now, or whether you're looking for a new job or a new company to work for, or maybe even a different industry within the investigation industry, whatever it is. Or, of course, if you're new and you just want to get into the industry, I hope this provides some value for you guys. And I will see you next week with another podcast. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.